Isom #2 by Eric July in the Rippaverse. This is the second book from Rippaverse now, and I gotta say I like it a lot more than I like the first one. Now, I made my first review, obviously, when I got my first copy, when he did the fulfillment for the first book, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was a good start. And I did mention, I'm going to mention it again here and mention it for quite a few of my reviews for this, because Isom in the Rippaverse is kind of my first comic. It's my kind of like my intro to comics. So I'm not going to sit here and say that I got some sort of deep knowledge on the history of comic books and Marvel and DC and stuff. I don't, and I don't really have a familiarity with like how comics are structured and how the pacing is supposed to be. So if it's weird maybe to some people that read these, the new Isom books from Rippaverse, if you think it's a little weird, maybe it's just something you're seeing that I just don't, because I don't have that experience with that. But yeah, the Isom stuff, the Rippaverse stuff is my intro really to comic books. I've just never really read comic books, so I am really enjoying the story so far. I think it's really good, and I did like the first one. It was a really good intro, as I said, but I think the second book is finally it's starting to really show us what this universe that he's trying to develop, Eric July is trying to develop, is he's showing off like what this universe is and what is in it, because the first one was all about the intro to Isom. We got a little glimpse here and there of some really interesting and crazy things that could happen in the Rippaverse itself, but this time where we're seeing a lot of different things that I personally enjoy a lot more than maybe I would have, expected from the first book. I liked a lot more within this book. So Isom #2, we're picking up from the continuing arc from the last book, where Isom is kind of dealing with Darren Fontano, I believe that's his last name. That's kind of like the central antagonist for Isom himself. But this book is more of like an introduction to not just his continuing conflict with Darren, but he's kind of like we're following him as we're learning all these different weird, crazy new characters and just how the universe is structured and how the universe is, because you got all these different characters that interact with like these accepts. That's what they call them in this, and it's they're basically the superhero, like super powered people in the Rippaverse universe. And with that, we're learning all these different characters, like the guy who makes Isom's suit in these different superhero suits and stuff like that. It's just we're learning these little things, and now we're starting to see some past history of Isom. And one big thing about Isom #2, I'm not going to get into spoilers really in this book. I'm just going to kind of cover it generally here, just kind of give my thoughts. I do like it more than the first one. I'm not saying the first one's bad. The first one is really good. It's a good start, but I think we're getting more into the juice of what the Rippaverse universe is. I think more in this book. It's not necessarily just Isom stuff. We do get some little hints here and there of some characters we've seen and we're going to see that he's announced, with Alpha Core and Yaira, and we see them a few times in this book. So I will say that it's not really much of a spoiler. We do see the Alpha Core and Yaira in this book a few times. They don't play a significant part in Isom's story in this one. Again, it's like little teases, but you do see them in Isom too, and that is good to see, because it's good to tease them a little bit. We're going to see them soon. We're going to see the Alpha Core stuff that we're seeing this fall, and I think he's doing Yaira early next year. At the beginning of the book, we also do get to see why Isom ended up quitting, because what was kind of established in that first book is that Isom is kind of like a superhero in a way who has kind of given up. He's kind of just like retired almost in a way. He just kind of went off to start a ranch and just kind of get away from like all of the craziness and stuff. Something happened and we didn't know what it was, and we do learn what happened in this. I think it happened pretty quick in the beginning. I don't know if it worked. It definitely worked. I think it's fine. I was kind of surprised how quick they just flat out told us, like, this is what happened and this is why he has retired or quit as a superhero. But we obviously very much quickly get into the story. It's like he's getting his suit back. We saw that at the end of the first book. He's getting his suit back and he's going to go and become Isom again. Avery is going to become a superhero again in some way. We don't know what he's going to do exactly. We don't know what kind of superhero he's going to become after. And he's like rebirth as a superhero. But yeah, that's kind of the journey he's on in this. Is like him rediscovering like this universe that he kind of left behind, I'm guessing. And this is all kind of speculation around of what what the story is developing here. Is like this is the kind of the universe and the world that he left behind to go and just kind of get away from, and this is the stuff that he's getting back into. In this book we introduce a lot of new characters again, so there's a lot of potential again for the future stories that they can tell now. You got the Sydney Bloodruth character from the end, which really introduced probably the most interesting stuff for me. You got like the Projexis boss. I don't know how to say his name. I got it written down here. Uizbio. I probably butchered that name. I'm sorry. But I like the boss. He's basically Altona's boss, Avery's sister. He is the boss of this whole company and seems to be a pretty prominent like business and company in the city, like the Fluorspark city that we're set in. And I do like that character. I don't know how much we'll really get of him going forwards, but we do see a good chunk of him in this story, and I do like his character. He's pretty cool. So I did like that. And another character that was really interesting was the Gooding character. That's how I'm going to say his name, Gooding. I don't know if he's like a super person, but he's got a lot of tech and he's very helpful. He's like an investigator type of person, and he helps Isom figure out some things that are going on. There's some weird creatures and monsters that are finally introduced into this, and that is something that I liked the most in this book, is that we're really getting into some really wild fantasy creature dimension stuff, and I think that stuff is really cool. I really do. Isom initially got introduced as kind of like a grounded character. It's, fighting off some, crime boss and stuff, and that stuff is cool. Personally, for me, man, I think the fantasy, monster, magic, and just the superhero powers, like these full power humans and all that, I think that stuff is really cool. I mean, at the end of the first book, we had the Norfolka people, which we didn't see in this book. We had the Norfolka group at the end, and that was probably the most interesting part of the book for me in the first one, because it was like, what's going on there? These people are, they're like obviously like super powered. They're not from Earth, and they're talking about something coming, and that was very intriguing to me. And this introduces a lot of different things. Now, the character of Sydney Bloodruth, she's a character that introduces a lot of that mystical stuff that I was talking about that I really like. And the storyline at the end, that later chunk of the story there with Isom and Sydney Bloodruth, I won't get into the spoilers of it. You can kind of see it on the cover here, on the cover B here. You can see it. The story that they get into with these creatures that you do see in this book, I think it's super fascinating. And we don't know much about these creatures and what's necessarily going on yet, but we do get to learn, a little bit of Sydney Bloodruth, and we get to learn a little bit of her, and we get to learn just kind of like what her powers can kind of do and stuff. And we're just introducing this character, but it's not necessarily that she's done a whole lot yet in the story, but like what the story that she brought into the book, and like what it involved in the different types of magic, creatures, and just that kind of feeling in this story. It felt very different than when Isom was going and trying to get to Darren in the first book. It was a very different type of story and action sequences and stuff. It was you're battling like these mysterious creatures from like an unknown dimension or something, and it's super interesting. I really I like the look. I like the design of these creatures, so I think it will lead to something very interesting. But Isom number 2, I think it is a great continuation for our Isom number 1, and I'm trying to just kind of tell you guys really how I feel. And I really like the book, and I think it's better than Isom 1. And again, I don't think that's because Isom 1 was bad. I think this is just, we're really getting a little deeper now. Okay, we're starting to learn a lot of different things, and The story itself, I don't know if it's gone that far yet. I know we're gonna have like Isom 3, 4, 5, whatever they're gonna do. So like I know there's a lot to go, but we haven't gone too far yet. We haven't done that much with Isom necessarily, but we also kind of have. We're starting to learn some stuff about him, and we're kind of seeing his powers and his abilities some more, and the things that he can do. And we're starting to learn that I think these first few books are really starting to show us what the Rippaverse is in the universe that we're going to get into with these comics and these books that are coming from the Rippaverse. So I think it was another good setup book in a way. It just felt like it was a good setup book with a lot more in it. You know what I mean? So I think we're going to get some really, after this book, I'm very confident in just how good the future stories can be. And I know we're going to get some different perspectives and stories now with the Alpha Core book and the Yaira book. And then we're going to have Isom 3 next year, probably. I think they're starting off really, really well. And I think it's almost like not a superhero origin. We're not doing that superhero origin thing where it's like full blown, this is a normal person or something, and then they discover powers, and we're not really doing that where we're jumping into this hero that we have to learn about through different pieces throughout his story that he's telling in the present, and how his past affected him without really knowing his past yet. So he's already been a superhero, and he's kind of jumping back into it. I think that's cool. I think there's a lot of cool potential for the Rippaverse stuff. I feel a lot more excited after Isom 2 than Isom 1. I think there was some good potential, and there was that little bit of hype right at the end of Isom 1 with the Norfolk stuff. But I think after reading Isom 2, I really enjoyed like most of the book now. Like I really was really excited throughout most of the book, instead of like, okay, we're doing that. I didn't know how to feel necessarily yet with Isom 1. It was a good start, but I didn't really have a true vibe and feeling of how this world was going to develop and be. And now I have a stronger development of how this universe is going to, fully, come about, and what kind of things we could see with different dimensions and creatures and monsters and stuff. And it's not just like a grounded type of universe. It's like we can have that stuff, but we can also have some really cool, weird creatures and fantasy and mystical powers and all that stuff too. And I think it's really cool. We're going to see a lot of different things in the Rippaverse. I can tell that now. We're going to see lots of different, unique things. And I think there's a lot of potential for way beyond even just Isom. Isom is just starting out too, but there's a lot of potential. So many characters they've now done and introduced that can probably spin off. I know we're doing a few already, but that can spin off and build this entire universe that they're trying to build. So that's kind of just my review of Isom number 2 without giving really much away. I just wanted to talk about the book and how I felt about after reading this second book. I'm much more optimistic about the Rippaverse now. Personally, I think it's going in a very strong direction, and I do like it. Certainly recommend picking up Isom number 2. The campaign's still going, but they're starting the shipments now. They're starting fulfillment now, so we're getting our books, and I think it's going to be a good ride here going into the next few years with this. And I think we're going to ramp up more and more books, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I really like Isom 2. I certainly recommend it.